Hey everybody, this is Brett with the Indie Comics Dispatch and broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the Milky Way galaxy. This is broadcast from the Dispatch.
If you got a story and you want the world to know it, if you think you ready and you ain't afraid to show it, throw your hands up high, yeah, we might stand out. We always representing cause that's what it's all about. We always representing cause that's what it's all about. And if you love some indie comics, let me hear you shout. Like, just stay tuned, what's the story? Had to get that every time a brand new indie comic from the Dispatch.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Thursday night of broadcast from the Dispatch. I'm your host, Brett. I'm with Indie Comics Dispatch. I'm here just about every single week. Tonight we have a special guest, someone who I love his books, and I'm excited to have him on. He pledged to the Kickstarter to have his own night, and so here we are. We're going to start with a one-on-one interview with Gerald Boney, and then move to a panel discussion with other indie comic fans and fanatics to talk age ratings in indie comics and just comics in general. But before we get to all that, a couple quick announcements. One, I am very excited. We have launched the submission period for Tales from the Dispatch Volume 3. It just started. We already have 2 submissions. We just opened submissions yesterday, and we already have 2 submissions, which I am just thrilled about. So Volume 3 of Tales from the Dispatch, it's our comic anthology, kind of trying to target new creators, up-and-coming creators, maybe creators who are trying to try out a different style than what they usually publish in. And you can submit your book. It's 2 to 10 pages, complete story, and you can submit it at indiecomicsdispatch.com/anthology. You have until February 28th, 2022 to submit. So submissions just opened, but they don't close to the end of February. So if you're not like the couple people who already submitted, you got time. You got time to figure out a story, work on a story, and get it submitted. I hope that some people out there will take advantage of that. Volumes 1 and Volume 2 last year, you can see a little bit of them right over here. They were fantastic. Tons of great stories in there. Over 100 pages total of content from Volumes 1 and Volume 2. We're trying to do 1 volume this year, just a little bit larger. We'll see how that goes, seeing as how we already have 2 submissions. But you can read all about it at indiecomicsdispatch.com/anthology. Another thing we don't talk about enough is we do reviews and news releases, press releases at Indie Comics Dispatch. So if you want to get the word out about your comic by either submitting it for a review or submitting your press release about your project, you can do that. I'm going to keep the screen up because you can go here. You can go to Contact Us, Submit, and looky there. You can submit a press release or submit a book for review right there. Couple of things about submitting a book for review. You got to take the score we give you. Like, it just is what it is. It's something that kind of different about us is that we don't necessarily start at 100 and deduct. We kind of start by assuming every book is average, right? Every book is a 2.5, and then you either earn points for not being average or get points taken away for not being average. And so it can go either way. And so if you submit a book for review and you get a 3, you get a 3.5. That's not a bad score. Some people see that because I think Amazon or whatever think that that's a bad score, but no, that's actually a good score. That's above average with the way that we rate stuff. And going all the way up to 5.0, which is nearly impossible to get. Really, over 4 is really, really hard to get by our standards, because we really take a critical look at the ins and outs of how you put the comic together. We want to build a bigger, better indie comic community, and that means being honest in our critiques. So you can submit on our website, indiecomicsdispatch.com, for a review or a press release. If you don't know what a press release is, it tells you all about it right there on our website. So please go take a look. Press releases are very helpful for you, the creator. And yeah, gets your word out about your comics. So, all right. That's all the announcements I have for this week. So I'm going to switch here and introduce our primary guest for this evening, Gerald. Gerald is an indie comic creator from North Carolina. He writes letters and self-publishes comics under his Myth World Media banner, and his flagship character is Myth Smith, aka the world's greatest supernatural adventurer. Gerald, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
No problem. I'm excited to have you on here. I remember you popped in for a little bit when we did a creator pop-in back over the summer, I think. So I've been waiting to get you back because I've been looking forward to talking about Mythworld and everything you got going on. So before we get into Mythworld and Myth Smith, tell us a little bit about your origin story as a creator. How did you get started into comics?
It's pretty much a lifelong thing, man. My older brother was into comics. My brother was 6 years older than me. We shared a room growing up, and my dad was pretty strict about no TV during the school week. First it was no TV, then we got an hour of TV. So I come in, watch like G.I. Joe and Transformers, and then that was my TV for the day. But yeah, since we couldn't really watch TV, we were big readers, pretty much all of us. I'm the youngest of three. So like I said, my brother was into comics, and that's what was there to read. And I always had like an active imagination. So I was always into it. Even before I could read, I can remember just looking at the pictures in his books when I was real little, couldn't even read yet. And he had books from every publisher. So I'm not one of those people, I don't understand people who like only read Marvel and only read DC,
Yeah.
Marvel, DC, Harvey, which was, like Casper and Richie Rich and all that.
Yeah.
Archie books, Mad Magazine, Cracked Magazine, Crazy, which was like a bootleg magazine.
Yeah.
There's a magazine called Creepy. He had like a couple of issues of that. And, he didn't get new ones all the time. So I'd read some of the same books over and over. Mm-hmm. And we both used to draw too. So I was always drawing characters and making up characters. And my friend Joe lived a couple houses over. He also was a comic head. So we had like our own little comic universe. We'd draw characters and we'd act out the adventures. And, as we got older, you stopped acting out the adventures. But I was still...
Do you stop? I'm not sure.
At least physically,
True.
They're still going on in my head. So yeah, I for a long time, I thought I was going to draw and write, but I was never really great. Compared to people who can't draw at all, I was good, but definitely not something that would be worthy of, being in a book. I wouldn't try to sell nobody, not draw. So yeah, I was always into doing it, and finally started really taking it seriously. I used to dream about doing it. When you're little, you want to work for Marvel and DC or whatever. But as I got older and started reading more books, because first books I was buying was from like spinner rack days. You might be too young for that, but I'm older than you.
I remember. Yeah.
So I used to get them from convenience stores and even the grocery store carried them. Then once I discovered the comic shop, and you discover these different companies, and then when I was, in my late teens is when like Image debuted and Milestone, and Dark Horse had been around for a while, and other different companies, So I started liking more than just the big two, quote unquote. And I started thinking about, I don't want to work for them. I want to do my own thing. And then I don't know, kind of BS'd about it. Just dreamed about it more than actually. I mean, I would always write stuff down and have character names and bios and stuff, even little sketches. But I didn't really start taking it serious as far as actually doing it. About 2009 is when I started like commissioning art and saying, I'm really going to do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. So when you first got into it, how? Hold on. Brad says, give us Myth Gerald. Myth Smith is one of my favorite indie characters. His potential is limitless. I feel the same exact way.
Shout out to Brad, man. He's like the biggest indie fan out there.
He is. He is. He's huge into it. I love it. I love it. So let's talk about Myth World, Myth Smith, and your other projects, Myth World. And give us the deep dive before I ask you more questions. Let's since Brad brought it up, let's hear about Myth Smith.
Okay, Myth Smith issue 0 right here. It's the first one that came out. He's a supernatural adventurer. He's as you can see, he doesn't really have a costume. He's just in kind of like regular clothes. But he's a couple hundred years old. He's basically been tasked, like in my universe, there's this extra dimensional realm called Next Door, and that's where magic comes from. And Earth and Next Door are connected. So everything we've ever imagined exists over there. So every mythology, wives' tale, whatever you want to call it, fairy tale, folk tale, it's all real over there. And some of it has crossed over here. And it's Myth's job, not going to say how yet, you'll find that out eventually in the story, but it's Myth's job to maintain the balance between the real world and the world of magic. And, he's connected to that world. So he was kind of like born at a nexus point between both worlds. So basically he's living, breathing magic himself. But he's not a person, he's not Doctor Strange. He doesn't cast spells and stuff like that. But what he can do is, like when he travels over there, like if he wanted to, he could grab Excalibur and bring it back over here or use it. And, or any weapon you can think of. He has access to weapons and artifacts from all the different mythologies of the world. And they work for him. Basically, like when he's on Earth, they draw their power from him. So he has to be careful because they affect him, might tire him out, might knock him out. If it's too powerful of an artifact, it could kill him, so. And he has, for example, some of the main one, common ones he uses. It's got that flying carpet from like the, from Aladdin and stuff like that. He's got almost everything you see on him in this picture is an artifact. Even that coat. He's got that infinity pouch. That's where he keeps a lot of artifacts at once. His belt does something. I don't want to give everything away. Even that gun is that's not like a regular, it's not a regular blunderbuss. That's a magical gun.
I love it. That's so cool. So you have the main title, Myth Smith, and then you have another title that comes out with 2 stories in it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my other title, it's called Double Dose. First issue features Myth Smith. 2 stories in every issue. 2 stories by 2 different artists. With art by 2 different artists. And it's 2 complete stories. It's not a continuing thing. Each issue is going to feature a different character or group. And I've got so many characters and stuff, so this was a way for me to kind of showcase a lot of my characters. Just give like a quick story of them out there, not try to have like a whole huge graphic novel or ongoing series. And it can feature anybody that I create. So, for example, Miss has a Cyclops sidekick named Isley. So he might get an issue, even though I don't plan for him to have his own series ever, but he'll have an issue of Double Dose,
Mm-hmm.
And thought I'd have issue 2 out by now, but unfortunately things moving kind of slow on that front. But I wanted to share some art from issue 2. I'm gonna try to do this.
We started getting it worked out before. I was just gonna say I love the idea of Double Dose because that's one reason why I like anthologies. You can pick it up, read a short story, and put it down and not be left hanging. It's just a complete story, and that's why I love the idea of Double Dose. I think more creators would be smart to think of doing something like that to keep fans engaged in between the main story. Okay, I see your screen coming up. Just click on whatever you want to show, and I'll add it to the stream.
Okay. So this is kind of a Indie Dispatch exclusive. Haven't really shown much of her. I've shown a little bit of her online, but anyway.
All right, I'm gonna pull up your screen. Is it ready? I can't really tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't want to. Trying to click on a specific pic. Let me see.
It may be that you're only sharing the one particular window. You may need to click on it, and then I'll remove it, and then reshare the opened image. Sorry.
Okay.
While you're doing that, I'm gonna keep talking a little bit about Miss Smith. You sent me I think issue 0, maybe issue 1. I can't remember now. But I think you described Miss Smith as Indiana Jones meets Ghostbusters meets Shaft.
Yeah, that's my quick little
And I love that description because you're reading it and you're like, yeah, that's it. I love little catchy descriptions like that. Some people don't say like, don't compare your characters to other people's characters, but comparing it to stuff people know, I love that, and it just hooks you just like that. I love it.
Okay, this don't seem to want to do what I wanted to do.
Oh. Well, you can try sending it to me too through like a Facebook Messenger or something that's faster too, and I can try pulling it up while we keep talking.
Yeah, so I kind of describe him like that. He's definitely influenced by all those. I mean, Shaft is the least one. I mean, he is kind of a ladies' man. That's kind of like the main thing. But I kind of don't use that one as much now because people tend to think he's a 70s character. And he's not. I mean, he was around in the 70s because he, 250 years old. But I mean, he's not meant to be like I don't know. Some people seem to have thought he was supposed to be a parody. And that wasn't my goal. He was also heavily influenced by there was a book from Milestone called Zombie.
Yeah.
Back in the day. It was one of my favorites from them.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird and quirky. It dealt with like supernatural stuff. And yeah, that was definitely a big influence as well.
That's one that I always wanted to see more of when it was out too, because it was one of the later Milestone books, if I remember right. And then one of the series that just didn't last that long before Milestone kind of stopped producing the original universe, at least. So yeah. So let's, while you keep doing that, let's talk about art real quick. Tell us about it. You said you were going to try to draw the art, and decided you didn't want to do that undertaking. So tell us a little bit about your artists that you use.
Well, yeah. Well, I used to draw as a kid. It's been a long time since I drew. So yeah, I definitely wasn't going to try to draw this book. But issue 0 was drawn by a guy I frequently work with named Glenn Brewer. He's in Ohio. I met him on a website called blacksuperhero.com years ago. It was, the forum was called Hero Talk. And yeah, we've been working together ever since. I just spoke to him a couple of days ago. We got some more stuff in the works. I mean, conceptual right now. He drew issue 0. The mini, that's the one you read, 0. Issue 1, and well, the whole mini is going to be drawn by a fella named Jordi Perez, great artist, somewhere in Latin America. He's got several books going on by several people right now.
Here we go.
Okay, yes. So she's supposed to be the star of issue 2. That's her name is Medusa Oblongata.
I love it.
She's kind of because Myth really isn't your typical superhero. That's one of the reasons I went with him first. You know, he's no costume, no secret identity really. I just want to do something different, you know, because there's 800 billion superhero books. But at the same time, you know, people love those superhero books. So I might be working against myself with. So I want to have more than one. You know, you want to be diverse with your output. So, you know, she's got the costume. She's kind of a more traditional hero. She's part of a bigger story I have. She's just one part of it, but she's like the intro of that. I call it my Afrocosmic saga. And if you want to flip to the next, that's the villain she'll face in one of the stories. Guy named Tough Crowd. He can multiply and has super strength. If you go to the next one, that's first time I'm sharing a full page of what I got in the works. And this art is by an artist named Henry Wilson. Very talented guy. Cool.
I love the style.
And Medusa, you know, she's not from Earth. She's she's human, but her descendants or her ancestors left Earth a long time ago. Her storyline is, you know, it's very Jack Kirby as far as like his New Gods or the Fourth World, and also like Eternals influenced. And I don't mean the movie influence. I just mean like, you know, because when I came up with her, they hadn't even announced an Eternals movie.
You're ahead of the crowd.
But her people are like cosmic powered people. She ends up coming to Earth and pretty much accidentally becomes a superhero. You know, because that outfit she's wearing it's like a it's more like a ceremonial thing. But when she comes to Earth and gets in a fight with this guy, tough crowd, people are like, oh wow. You look at her in that outfit. Oh man, that's a superhero. That's her superhero outfit. I don't want to get too much away about her, but yeah, just want to give a little peek into her.
Sneak peek. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, so let's talk about, like, you've had this idea to do a comic for a while. What has surprised you the most about creating your own comic that you just weren't expecting?
You know what? I've been trying to think of a good answer for that. But I don't know what has been surprising about it. I don't know. Maybe I was a little too naive, a little too hopeful, or not hopeful. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess naive is the word, because I've had a few artists screw me over. Mm-hmm. I've commissioned and they didn't finish the work. And I was like, oh, come on. Because as far as the Myths miniseries, Jordy is my third artist.
Oh wow!
The first artist, he didn't screw me over. It's just that the art that he showed that made me hire him was different than the art. Mm-hmm. When I saw his sequentials he did for me, I had to move on. And then the second guy, he screwed me over. He straight up stole money from me. So yeah, screw you. And Jordy, I shout out to Jordy. He's been good to go. And a few other people just I've had mostly good experiences, but if I sit and think about all the money that I've had stolen from me, I might get a little pissed. So I try not to think too much.
Yeah. Don't think about it on air. Think about it afterwards. Oh, so go in with your eyes open and know that not everybody's in this for each other. I like to think of the indie comic community as one that a lot of
everybody's professional.
Yeah.
And I hear everybody talking about contracts, so yeah, that's definitely looking to getting contracts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because we're small doesn't mean you shouldn't take precautions to protect yourself. Yeah. So what's one piece? Well, there's one right there. Do you have any other advice you would give a first-time creator?
Yeah, I'd say think about starting off with like a one-shot. Like, my first book, Miss Smith issue 0. Mm-hmm. It's a one and done book. You're not waiting on. If you like it, you may be waiting for more, but it's not a continued story from that.
Right.
So don't come in trying to start off with your super epic, 30-part story for your first book. I'd say probably think about a one shot, even if you're doing even if you're not trying to do a physical book, even if it's just digital, get one done. And I'd also say, because I didn't do this myself, and I've been learning as I go, I'd say stockpile some material. This is beyond the one shot thing, but before you put something out, you might want to have might want to be like 3 issues in or something before you release that first issue. I wish I would have waited a little longer instead of just jumping out.
Right, because that way you have stuff to keep on putting out while new stuff's being worked on. I love that idea, actually. That's common sense, but nobody's actually ever said that on the show, so that's a great idea to put out there. I do want to say OnyxCon just joined in on Instagram and said, "What's up, Miss Smith?" OnyxCon.
Shout out to Joe.
Yeah, Joseph
Wheeler.
Yep. Good guy, puts on a OnyxCon here in Atlanta.
That was my first con.
Really?
I had done like Free Comic Book Day before, but as far as my first official con, 2011 was the first time I went, but the first time I was a vendor, 2014, Miss Smith issue 0 debuted at Onyx Con.
That's awesome. That's awesome. he said yes, Joseph, not Joe.
Sorry.
So we're here tonight, Gerald, because you backed the Kickstarter and you got to pick the topic. So we started off with this brief interview, getting everybody primed for Myth Smith, but we're about to switch to having a panel on to discuss age ratings in comics and indie comics in particular, but age ratings in any comics. So would you put an age rating on Myth Smith? And if so, what would it be before we switch over?
Issue 0, I would say, is all ages. But his miniseries is more mature. I usually say, treat it like a rated R movie, 17 and up.
Okay.
And that's another reason the chick I just showed, the character Medusa, she's all ages. So, because Myth isn't, so I want to have both.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to play a transition, and then we'll get into the panel. Mostly just because I like my transitions. That's the only reason I do that. Joining us on screen is first off, Brian Lambert, regular on the show. Brian is CEO and president of Wingless Comics. And Brian and I unknowingly twinned. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were brothers because we look so similar. Brian, welcome back. You're muted, man.
Man, I just said a really funny fucking joke too. Just FYI. I'm not gonna repeat it because it's not gonna be as funny now. But just think in your head like, damn, Brian is hilarious.
The funniest joke we could think of, you just said. Got it.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Got it. Well, welcome, Brian. Good to have you back. From Royal Oak Comics and Who's Bad Comic, we have Jamal. Jamal, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be on the show. Thank you for having me. How's everybody doing?
Doing good. And you have a Kickstarter right now, right?
I do. Conquer the Galaxy or Die Trying #1. It's 9 days left.
Very good. Well, drop that if you can. If you can, drop that link in the private chat, and then I will post it to the platform so people can check that out.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
No problem. And finally, another Wingless Comics person. It just kind of worked out that way this evening. Malachi Bailey. Hello, Malachi, creator of Her, both the comic and the novel.
I'm barely. You're like Emperor Palpatine. You're like a shadow.
Kind of like the unlockable video game character. But hey, guys, I couldn't tell Brett and Brian apart from the shirts. So
exactly.
Right?
You gotta look at the hair. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
Jamal, only difference. I'm still used to your hair being cut so short.
Me too. I missed the locks.
Well, Gerald, let's start with you. Tell us why did you pick this topic? Why is this an important topic?
I'm just interested in other creators' idea about it. Like I said, well, when I first, came up with Myth, I did not see him as a all ages character. I'm about to send you something else to share. I saw him as a, like a rated R book. There's cussing in the book, there's gore, potentially. It's not gonna be porn, but potential nudity.
Why not?
So, but as I wrote issue 0, I don't know. I was kind of like self-censoring. It was my first book, so it ended up being what I consider. It all depends on your perspective, but I consider it an all ages book. And when parents, when I'm at conventions and parents, ask, is it appropriate? I let them look through it, and So, you tell me, because there is some gore in it. Monster, it ain't, he does slash up some monsters, but he's not chopping up any people, at least not in that issue. So that was with issue 0. Now, issue 1, because it's a 4-issue miniseries, I went back to my original plan, but and I've got a few handful of people who buy every book. So I was at the local convention, Fayetteville Comic-Con, and there's a lady who comes every year and buys my books. And she bought issue 1 for her son. And, I thanked her and everything, and she moved on. Then after she was gone, I was like, oh no, this is I might have lost a fan with that because I didn't tell her, And
so based on this image we're sharing, I can see why you'd want an age rating on it. I mean, it's not that bad, but I imagine my son coming here, Daddy, why does this woman have a whip?
Yeah, that's a couple of Myths villains, Cruel and Unusual. And Cruel, as you can see, she's dressed as a dominatrix, and you couldn't see Unusual because she's behind her, but she's got 4 breasts.
I thought those were abs.
But so that was another reason why I came up with Medusa Oblongata, like I said, so I can have a book. So when someone asks, is it all ages, I'll have one that definitely is all ages.
Right. Smart. Now the idea, I kind of remember when the idea of age ratings for music and then eventually for TV kind of started popping up. It's a newer idea, but it has evolved as comics has evolved. I remember Image being one of the first companies that shunned the Comic Code Authority for good reason. But should we rate comics by age? Should we put a rating on comics? Gentlemen, I'd like to hear your take. This is more than just somebody walking up to you at a con and saying, should my 9-year-old read this? This is, should we put like M for mature on the cover of comics?
I personally plan to start. It's more like a suggestion, it's like 17 and up, and then or either all ages. Those are pretty much the 2 categories that I see myself writing in. I don't have anything. I mean, maybe one day. It's not necessarily aimed at real little kids, because when I say all ages, I mean Marvel and DC consider themselves all ages, and they can get kind of they get gory sometimes. So, like I said, it kind of depends on even that. Even when you say all ages, even that could be misleading.
Yeah. Jamal, what's your take?
Oh, I get it just because of how some people's views. You do want to be respectful for other people's views and I guess what they can tolerate. I could see it beneficial from a marketing standpoint. Me personally, I don't like it, but it's like I just want to do what I want to do, and you like it or you don't, it's cool. But I can see. I also want to be mindful, I guess, of other people's what they want to put into their own minds, or I guess their kids' minds. So I just try to be respectful of that.
Mal?
I would have to agree with the age ratings, and you're not trying to be a prude because I'm probably the furthest thing away from being a prude. But when you think about books like Preacher, I was told at 15 years old I should not be reading this book. And so my comic book shop owner, he's like, I'm not going to sell this to you. I don't want to hear your mom's mouth. So, of course, I found a way around it, and I ordered it. Remember those catalogs where you could just order all those sci-fi books or whatever, and then pay them? Yeah, so I did that. I never paid them. And
And
so
that's why they're not in business. Okay, keep going.
basically, so when I ordered, Preacher, I think it was volume 2, and I'm reading them. Okay, this is definitely grittier than I expected because I was so impressionable and innocent at that time. And then I got to the part where one of the rednecks was about to hump the chicken. I was like, now I know why he didn't want to sell this to me. So, for that reason alone, yes, we need to have some type of age rating.
Brian, you got thoughts?
I think that if we're talking about indie comics specifically, I think that it might be slightly important only because I troll Kickstarter probably like the rest of us do. We check it out all the time, and you have some innocuous book that's like, oh, magical sorceress, is also a detective or whatever, right? So like if you got like a child, like a young girl, you're like, oh shit, magical sorceress is also a detective. Like this is
But
probably
she
a dope
fights
book for
crime
her,
without
right?
a shirt on.
Yeah,
You get the
exactly.
book
That-
and
yeah, right. That's what you get. Like you go in, and even if you look at the covers, it's like, do you want the not safe for work cover or the regular cover? And you're like, damn, what? I wanted some magical mystery solved, bro.
You're right.
So I think that I mean, I feel like ratings aren't the end all be all. I think we're all old enough to have snuck into a rated R movie or done whatever you know what I mean, like
No.
easily,
No,
right?
not
Like some of that
me.
stuff doesn't even
Not me.
matter. Liars, fucking liars.
I am
Um,
pure.
so I feel like they're just suggestions, but it doesn't stop the creator from making whatever they want, right? It just kind of gives the audience that wouldn't. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, man. We're kind of fooling people if we're like, oh yeah, this is not safe for work, and you get like the church lady. Like church lady buys the Preacher book, right? Because its name is Preacher, and
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, oh, it's Preacher. Like my kids are gonna love this,
Yeah.
and then they got they having sex with chickens, right? Like we're kind of lying to them. But if we had that, like not safe or NC-17 or rated R or whatever, she may have thought twice about it, and it doesn't really stop the audience that wants our stuff, but it does stop the audience from being like fooled or missing it because a lot of people aren't knowledgeable about comics. All of us could go into a comic book store and get exactly what we want, but we're knowledgeable about comics in general. A lot of people aren't, and especially when you're talking about indies, especially when you're talking about black indies, it just takes on a whole different life. And again, not that I don't think we should rate everything, and that means you can't buy it, right? But if there's like the rating suggestion or whatever, I don't think that it hurts anything.
Joseph Wheeler on Instagram says that putting a rating on it is just being responsible and great for those who. It's great. Good job for those who rate their content. Sorry, making that make sense coming out was tough for me. So is there danger though in putting a rating on it? Is there drawbacks to it? I remember there was big pushback from artists when CDs first started getting a rating on them. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but there's big pushback from artists. So is there dangers to it? Gerald, I saw you teeing up.
Well, I just remember when you said about the artists pushing back. I remember that, but then eventually,
It's just the standard now.
Yeah, but even beyond the standard, it became. They made it push back at first, but then it's what they wanted because that's what the kids wanted. Like, I mean, Luke. Luther Campbell, his stuff sold better than ever once he got like banned or whatever. And he made that Band in the USA song, and that's when that was like his highest selling record up to that point. So I don't know if that translates to comics as far as you put a 17 and up, and that makes that will make a kid run out and get it. Because
I think it does the same thing, though. I think it does the same thing of like, it's really a marketing ploy, right? It actually targets the audience that you want. Because if you remember, the reason why because I remember getting in trouble for it, right? When the Band in the USA album came out and the stuff preceding that, it's because you had a bunch of kids, like children. I think I was only 5, 6 at the time, playing Luke, right? Like we had no, and he was still calling himself like Luke Skywalker before he had gotten in real, trouble, right? So like we were all like, oh yeah, Luke Skywalker, you know what I mean? And so when you had those ratings come out, you had a whole group of people that couldn't buy the CD, obviously, right? But that actually ended up being better for people because it actually gave them their real, true marketing. You didn't have, preteens buying this and then having their parents going and being outraged. Now the outrage comes before. I can't believe this artist did an R-rated album. Okay, cool. They're going to complain about it, but never buy it, never return it. All the people who are going to buy it are going to buy it regardless. The same thing for R-rated movies. If you remember, like, wait, what was it? Like Goonies. Goonies is like a rated G movie. And so is Transformers. But I remember when both of them cursed, oh man, it was like big stuff. Like the Bible Belt went nuts when Sparky is like, oh shit, because they're about to die. And the same thing like in Goonies, right? Like when they were cussing, or Stand By Me, even though Stand By Me was R-rated R, but all of us somehow went to go see it. But when that stuff happened, right, then you had all these parents that were flipping out about it because they thought the ratings were wrong and they didn't know. And that was at a time where you could just give kids, you know, hey, here's $20. I don't want to see you till like the street lights come on. So
Well, your parents would give you $20 and tell you that?
No, I meant for the whole group. No,
Okay, yeah,
entire group. No, it was like 12 of us, bro. Movies were 50 cent, popcorn was 25. Like, come on, bro. And we had our bikes.
Well, I was gonna, when you mentioned that, so I taught a youth group at church for a while, and one day we had nothing going on. It was a big event at the church, and we weren't going to teach Sunday school. We were just going to show a movie, and I showed Back to the Future because I was like, "This is a fun movie."
Yeah, no,
that's not a fun movie not for church. I was watching, going, "Oh my god!" Like, and then I checked the rating. I'm like, '80s ratings meant something different than today's ratings, and so So I guess that gets into it, like how you can put an age on it, but some mama may still come up and yell at you at a con because her 16-year-old doesn't know genitalia exists, you know, or whatever. She thinks they don't. So what content should kind of be labeled as not for kids or under a certain age? Like, I don't know. I don't know that I should, as a creator, I don't know that I would feel comfortable assigning that, you know?
There is one group, there is one publishing entity that I will not name. You already know who I am thinking about. But yeah, they need to have a big.
I wonder, do they have a magical sorceress detective solving mysteries with their shirts off half the time?
Shirt. It's breast image everywhere. No shade.
All shade. All shade.
Palm tree belly.
No, you know what? Honestly, I think it's a little bit of common sense, right? Like, especially when you're talking about like comic gore, because you do have something like DC that'll say that their stuff is all ages, and then Superman won't punch somebody's face off, but you know what I mean? Like Black Adam will, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that there's, I don't know. I just think you got to be wise, but I also don't think that it should be something that puts you in a controlled, harsh box. Right. The overall content can be spawn, right? So that's like, you know, rated R, let's say. Okay, cool. No big deal. Everybody agrees with that. And it's just kind of common and we all know it. I do think that when you do have a lot of nudity, depending on the type, or, you know what I mean? Like explicit nudity, which is different in certain cases. You got a lot of explicit nudity. Why not say that? You know what I mean? Because again, because that is one of those, like a societal norm where it's like, okay, if people have a bunch of nudity, we let people know. If there is like a bunch of gratuitous killing there, you know what I mean? Because you can have a movie like The Expendables 2, right? They took down the gore, not the gore, but they took down how many people bleed. All the people that get shot, you know, it's like a puff of smoke comes out instead of blood, right? So then that changes the dynamic of the action and of the death or the killing, which I think could be the same in comics. If you're not explicitly showing somebody getting disemboweled, then why do you need to say it's not safe for work? It's pretty normal. But again, I think following societal norms, comics should do the same. For a long time with the Comics Code Authority, like it was whack because it was like too corny. It was too much on one side. So I think that pendulum is swung the other way. We've had the dark times, whatever. But if we follow social norms, again, I don't think that it hurts us at all as creators.
Well, that's what I was going to get to, too, about the Comics Code Authority. Are we swinging back towards that kind of too much control? I mean, we're all indie, right? So there's really no danger of a Comic Code Authority coming down on us anymore. But there is peer pressure. There is industry pressure. Is there danger, Gerald? I'd love to hear you on this. Is there danger in that pendulum swinging too far back?
I mean, can it go back? Because I mean, who can tell us what to do as far as indies?
Yeah, I don't
I mean,
know. That's why.
Kickstarter decided it wanted to, I don't know, pull an OnlyFans and just said, "Hey, it has to
Right.
be
That's
clean
an idea for
content."
comic books.
That's
Huh?
true. There are capitalistic pressures that could happen to kind of force it, like you
I hope
said.
not, but yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. Somebody else. I gotta think on it.
Jamal,
Pandora's
you got
box,
more thoughts
bro.
on
It's
that?
it's open, Brett. The Pandora's box is open. You can't close it, and it's how do you tell people, especially in this society with racism as prolific as it is at this point, especially when you're talking about on social media, people fighting for their, this is my, First Amendment right to say whatever I say and blah 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 blah. Now we're part of the media. If we're, you know what I mean, like if we're actually publishing this stuff, how do you tell them no? I don't believe that there's a part where you can't go back and fit it in a box. Also, storytelling, right? No one wants to, as much as I love, Batman, Superman comics. I like Jeff Johns writing on them. Nobody wants to see the Batman composite, Batman, Superman composite robot. Nobody wants to see that corny shit anymore.
Right.
So you've got to have a little bit of realism to it. So if you get realism, then you're going to get some things that are a little bit harder hitting. And that's just kind of how it is. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing that can be done about it, or nothing should be done about it.
True.
I want to welcome Quentin real quick. I was hoping Quentin could pop in for a few minutes because though it doesn't fit in the Google schema of how we post reviews, if you follow Quentin on social media, you will see on every book he rates, he gives it a rating as if it were a movie. And that comes from a story specifically, Quentin, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Tell us the story.
Similar to you, where being a youth group minister, my church did a trunk or treat thing, and I was handing out comic books, and I had parents coming back at me, Batman's, having interaction, with prostitutes. There's cocaine in this book. How can you be handing this out to kids?
I want that
So,
book.
so after that, that, and I had a buddy that would, came up to me going, "I'm trying to figure out something good for kids to read. I need your help." So after that, I started making it a point. Everything I wrote about would be hey, would I let my kids read this? And rather than going based on a basis of okay for my kids, because my kids are different from our other kids. My 10-year-old loves Stranger Things, but so I started going okay. If it were a movie, I'd say it would be rated, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, Quentin's one of our, I call him our head reviewer because he's the most prolific reviewer at Indie Comics Dispatch. And so he reviews a ton of books for us, a ton. And so he has a good idea of what kind of goes into some of those ratings.
Sorry, I haven't gotten as many done lately.
Well, I was going to talk to you about that, Quentin. No,
by my standards, the last couple months, I've been nowhere near where I should be.
Yep. Well, by my standards, you're still doing great. So ratings, Quentin, what do you come across that you would say should not be rated as for kids?
Anything, if I'm going through it, if I come across cussing at all, it's instantly at least a PG-13. Because if there's a shit, bitch, anything like that,
Well, great. You just gave us an E rating.
Putting that in my next book, right?
Well, that's why at the beginning of my show, it's always, hey, parental guidance is suggested. So guide your parents the hell out of the room so we can have some fun. But if an F-bomb comes in, if it happens one time, I just like the movie code. If PG-13, if it's multiple, it's R or above. And then on top of that, kind of like what I came in on where you guys were talking about it, how much gore is there? If there's a lot of gore, that'll ratchet the rating up a little bit. Do I see the potential for later in the series there's going to be gore? That'll ratchet the rating up a little bit.
Well, speaking of gore, so this is interesting. Dan Schmidt, Worms Crawl In. If you don't have that book, buy that book. It's a wonderful book. Thoughts on the acceptance of violence gore, because that's much more accepted in our society, versus nudity / sexual content, which is kind of frowned upon, at least, yeah, seemingly, in the large circle of people. So thoughts on that? Why do we accept violence gore and rate that lower than we would nudity?
I think honestly that goes back to when the white man came across the ocean. We're talking the Puritans, a group of people so uptight the English kicked them out. One of the American classics, Scarlet Letter, was about a woman that had an affair.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been all throughout history, the Salem witch trials, because men were having impure thoughts about these women, so certain women in the village, in the area, so the wives of the men were basically starting up stories. It all comes back to their view on sex.
Anybody else have thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, I remember my college dorm, we were playing Tekken 3 or whatever, and my roommate's just complaining about how the girls are dressed. Meanwhile, he's pile driving somebody's head into concrete in a video game. But that's okay,
Especially with something else.
Yeah, it's like, it's the history of violence that comes with this country, and it's a lot of undertones and a lot of different things that it exists in, and it's just acceptable here.
Well, and even I'm thinking like there's a certain level of tolerance for heteronormative sexuality, but then you break out of that, and all of a sudden it's from the devil. Like it's just completely off board. So I mean, any thoughts on that? Anybody too? I mean, it's just, I think Nick Quinton hit the nail on the head with the puritanical culture. Somehow we inherited views from the Puritans of all people. And anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think it has to do a lot with, obviously, with the historical context that you put it in, but violence is always something that's been done outwardly, and sexuality is always something that's been done inwardly. Like if you think about, again, societal norms, right? Like there were duels, there's wars, there's always like a force of action. Force is like the thing that's made everything happen, historically speaking, right? Like the force or the threat of force. Sexuality, on the other hand, and again, it goes to the Puritans, it goes to colonialism in general, the proliferation of Christianity, on and on and on, where sexuality of almost any form, right, is supposed to be behind closed doors, this secretive, quiet hush hush thing, and so when you have passages in the Bible, and it's like, yo, if your woman has done such and such, then burn all her clothes, burn the tent you were in, don't ever talk about it. But then like the next sentence is like, hey, if you're not an Israelite, go out and kill everybody that's not an Israelite, and like burn their cows and burn their crops, and we're good, right? So it's always been this like lesser than, greater than thing. But it also stems the tide of, I think that there's a big difference between violence and then gore, and then nudity, and then sexuality, because I think that they kind of play off each other, right? Like you can have like violence, right? And then you can have sexuality. No one really kind of bats an eye. I mean, it's on TV now. Like I went through the 80s TV to like where you have TV now. Then you go gore, and then sexual content, like actual nudity, right? Like, what was it? RoboCop got an NC-17, not for nudity, but for gore. It was the first movie ever to get that. But that's because the uncut version is ridiculous. But look how far they had to go to get that. Whereas Basic Instinct got an NC-17 for the uncut version, which was super tame compared to what we have on TV now. So I think that again, violence and gore are different, and sexuality and nudity are different, and they got their own hierarchical structure within media.
I don't think it's a Jesus structure, but that's okay.
Jesus is in all structures, sir.
Okay, here we go.
I'd like to follow up there. Brian was talking about, sex is so hush hush. If it's hush hush, you're doing something wrong.
This is true. And I also want to add to that as well. There is a lot of shaming when it comes to sexuality, and
Very true.
To the point where people take they have power when it comes to being sexually assertive or just being a sexual being, and that's shame, that's looked down upon because the oppressor is not in control. Now, when you're perpetrating violence, when you're attacking someone, you know, you're this big macho guy, and you know you're having like these bloody fisticuffs, you know, that puts you in a position of power. But with other people who are enjoying sex, or they want to show up a little cleavage or nuttage or whatever you want to call it, you know, people, you know, they're uncomfortable. All of a sudden it's like, hey, you can't do that. And it's like, well, if it's my body and I'm gonna, you know, consent an adult, it's none of your business. But this country, this society has always been in everyone else's business but their own. So my 2 cents.
I love that. I feel like we could do a whole show on how culture affects what we write and what we find acceptable. Putting it down on the list. So final question for tonight, because we are over an hour now. Ultimately, and this could be divisive, I don't know, is it the creator's job to label the content, or is it a parent's job to know what content their children are consuming?
I'd say both. I mean, it's the creator's job to decide if he or she wants to label it. And, you know, I'm not a parent, but I mean, you should. I mean, I would think you'd want to know what they're reading, even if it is labeled. So
as a parent too, like I know, like my son's playing Xbox right over there. He's going to hear this and be like, "Dad," but like putting a label on it would probably make him want to read the higher level than what he's should, you know. And so I think there's temptation that way too. But sorry, I interrupted my own question because that just popped into my head. So is it a creator's job? Is it a parent's job? Is it some sort of marriage between the both?
For me, I think it's a little bit of both, but more, you know, it's a parent's job to, hey, know what your kids are reading, and you know, but taking a step further back, know your kids.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, case in point, my 10-year-old, I let him watch Stranger Things. You know, and if they're with the way the personality for my 7-year-old is, if he carries on being the same way he is at 10, he won't be ready for Stranger Things. You know, but the big thing is, if it's, you know, for anything that's, you know, more illicit content, if it's not being marketed at kids, I have no problem with it.
Anybody else? Any final words here?
Right.
I want to say, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jamal.
I want to say the onus is on the parents, because essentially you're the one with the problem, so you should be the one ahead of your problem. But at the same time, you know, I do want to be respectful of others and not have somebody, you know, yakking away at me. So I feel like in my best interest, it's best to list that, hey, this has bad language, this has violence, this has sex, you know, and then you have been warned that it has this. But also, like Quentin said, you know, the parental advisor label, like I didn't want a CD that didn't have that when I was in high school. So it's just like, you know, it does gravitate, you know, kids to want what's forbidden. So it's a very nuanced thing, but yeah, I do think it's mostly on the parents.
Brad added, my folks wouldn't let me get the Vampirella magazine when I was young. I don't think
love
mine would
that
have allowed me to get that either, Brad. I get everything Vampirella that I can get my hands on now. There's a lot of Vampirella out there. As we wrap up here, Gerald, tell everybody where they can find you, how they can support you, and MythSmith, and get the books.
Mythworldmedia.com. There's an E at the end of world, so MYTHWORLDE media.com. Yeah, that's where you can get my books. Got posters and t-shirts as well. And that's my everywhere social media is either MythWorld with the E or MythWorld Media.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Go follow Gerald. He's got some great books out there. Brian and Malachi from Wingless Comics. You can find them at Wingless Comics and winglessent.com online. But I hear that website's going to be going through a transition soon, is what I've heard.
I think so. But so since real quick, I'm gonna interrupt Brad because he definitely skipped me because I want to say some stuff.
You really did, though. But all
right? You heard that, both of us actually. So
well,
that's cool.
I thought there was an inside thing going on there that I wasn't.
No, Immortalis has been delayed till 2023. Thank you very much, guys, for that shit. No, so I think that responsibility and fault, right? Mm-hmm. So like if a parent gets something that they didn't want for their child, it's their fault because they should have at least fucking read it. You know what I mean? They should at least flip through it or ask you about it, right? At least say, hey man, you think this would be cool for my 7-year-old? Don't just buy it. Ask me. Especially if we're talking about in-person cons, we're talking to people, whatever else. So if they get something for their child that they didn't want, that's their fault. I do think that on the other end, though, there is a responsibility, right? And that goes in, for me, into social contracts. We used to have a fairly high number of social contracts. A lot of those have kind of withered away with time, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. But the social contract aspect of it, of us saying like, hey, before the old lady goes and buys the book, like, hey, I got some blood and guts and stuff in here, right? Are you good with that? So that she's not caught unaware, right? I think that I had at my very first con, I had a lady come up and I could tell she was a church going lady. My whole family is like Southern Baptist. So like, it was like immediate, like she jumped out at me like, oh, here comes a Southern Baptist lady, right? My character has wings on it, blah, 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 blah. So she of course comes up, but I'm not stupid. I know Southern Baptist like people. So I tell her what the comic is and her face went from like to real hard, real quick. And it was like her little like nephew or her grandchild. I can't remember. And she was like, oh, yeah, we'll come back and get it. I knew she wasn't coming back to get it, but that's why I told her about it, right? Because if she had gotten it, she would have been pissed. Mm-hmm. So as much as it is a parent's job to know their child, know the content, all those other things, again, I think there's like a social responsibility for us to be able to say like, not saying this might not be for whoever it is, but be, honest with ourselves and with our product enough to say, hey, this is what the product is, right? Because the product should stand on its own anyway. I don't want anybody buying it on accident and being like, this ain't what I wanted. Ultimately, even if they say it in their room and they never bring it back to me, I want whoever buys my content to be invested in my content. And the only way you can do that is by being honest with your content.
Mm-hmm. Mal, you had something to add?
Oh, yeah, I did. So now I'm thinking, like, if my mom had stopped me 25 years ago when it came to that Preacher comic book, maybe I would have turned out differently. So much regret now.
Nope.
Wrong. I was reading Danielle Steele at 13. I mean, I was on a path to horror.
Thank you for adding that insight to the conversation, Malachi. I appreciate that. Guys, thank you for being here this evening. Thank you all for contributing to this conversation. Brad Arney said he ordered a shirt.
What did he say? What did he say? What did he say again?
My mouth is not working today. Whose idea was it to start a podcast? Brad Arney ordered a shirt tonight, Gerald. So we got you at least one sale from Brad. Also, if you're out there watching this on social media, I dropped the Royal House Comics Kickstarter in the comments section. Conquer the Galaxy or Die Trying looks amazing. #1 on Kickstarter now. It's got Kickstarter says 8 more days, but I don't know Kickstarter time. So
Royal Oak Comics. Shout out to Royal House. You guys are awesome. But Royal Oak.
Oh shit! Sorry.
No, all good.
And before I screw anything else up, we'll include the correct link in the show notes for the podcast too. If you're listening to this podcast, check the show notes for both Gerald's web address, the Royal Oak Comics Kickstarter address, and I'll throw winglessent.com in there too, just because I'm a nice guy. Guys, thanks for joining us this evening. Next week, we have another episode. And I do this every week. I don't have the schedule up. Next week, Ben O'Grady, I believe, is our guest, and he will be leading us in a conversation of, I don't know.
You're probably gonna cut him off too, so it doesn't
We're-
matter, bro. Don't worry.
I'm
Maybe
sorry,
it's
were you
just
saying
time
something,
to go.
Brian? I'm sorry, what? Where the indie comic industry, where the comic industry is heading with Ben O'Grady, and maybe a special guest also on that evening too. Guys, thank you for joining us. Everybody out there watching, thanks for joining us. If you're out there listening to the podcast, thank you. Our podcast is growing, and you guys are awesome for sharing it and liking it and rating it. All those things help it grow. So if you're out there listening, you're a new listener, hey, go ahead and like, rate, share. It helps us out. Everybody out there, we'll see you next week.